The Sopranos is not just a mafia show. It is a deeply psychological story about the inner world of a man caught between crime, violence, and betrayal. Tony Soprano is a figure caught between two different worlds. On the one hand, traditional mafia culture, ruthlessness, and a rigid masculine role. And on the other hand, the chaos of the modern world, therapy sessions, and emotional dilemmas. The struggle for existence of a man trapped between these two contrasting realities. Tony is on the one hand a father trying to protect his family, and on the other, a ruthless crime boss. Violence is part of his life, but it is not the only thing that rules him. He is not only a gangster who sheds blood, but also a human being who struggles with the fear of death, betrayal, and the ghosts of the past. When he feels like he is having a heart attack, he is shocked to realize that the problem is not physical, but mental. A mafia boss going to therapy? This is something that challenges the mask imposed on him by the world he lives in, because what Tony has been taught is clear. A man is strong, doesn't show his feelings, doesn't show fear or pain. But Tony is experiencing a crisis precisely because of this, because he cannot deny the emptiness inside him in a generation that was raised by suppressing his feelings. A child who grew up in the shadow of his father. He's never tasted his mother's love. He's always felt incomplete. Growing up in a world where she has to appear strong, she carries a deep fragility inside her. He is divided against his own children. Should he be an authoritarian father or someone who understands them? He gets angry when he thinks his son is weak, but the idea of him being like him terrifies him. Because Tony doesn't really know what his own life means. Whenever he finds peace, something pulls him back. Happiness always feels like a temporary luxury. For him, life is about winning. It's a world of survival of the fittest. But strength is not only physical, but also mental. If even a mafia boss needs therapy, is it a weakness, or is he beginning to see the truth? In every session, Tony looks at the shadows of the past, his father's actions, his mother's coldness towards him, and he realizes, no matter how strong he tries to be, the emptiness inside is always there. Because the problem is not in the outside world, but inside. The world of Tony Soprano is not only the world of a criminal organization, but also the world of a man who carries the heavy burden of his family heritage. Because he felt obliged to follow in his father's footsteps, he rose in the mafia, proved himself with power and violence, but he did not know what to do with the emotional emptiness his father left him. His father is both an idol and a shadow in his eyes. He was taught that he had to be strong, but does this power really belong to him? Or is it just a burden he inherited? As a child, he had to grow up in the world built by his father. His presence is both a source of security and a pressure on her. But her real trauma lies in her relationship with her mother. Livia Soprano is one of the most complex figures in Tony's life. Her lack of love has opened a wound inside Tony that never closes. When Tony realizes that no matter how strong he is, he cannot change his mother's lack of love for him, anger and emptiness grow together. That's why the more he tries to show himself strong, the more fragile he becomes. Because this is the only way he has been taught. To be strong, to crush others, not to show weakness. But when he looks at his own children, he realizes the contradiction inside him. His son AJ is the exact opposite of him. He's sensitive, emotional, prone to depression. In Tony's eyes, that's a weakness. He thinks he needs to toughen him up. But deep down, he realizes he doesn't want his son to be like him because he is trapped in his own life and he doesn't want the same cycle to swallow his son. But he doesn't know how to be different. That's why he sometimes becomes an authoritarian father like his father, and sometimes a father who tries to be more understanding to him. But he can never figure out exactly what kind of father he should be. His daughter Meadow is a completely different story for him. Meadow represents a life that Tony wants to reach, but cannot reach. She is an educated, independent person who draws a path away from the world of crime. Tony wants her to live a life different from his, but at the same time, her choices remind him how twisted Tony's world is. So sometimes he wants to protect her, and sometimes he has to accept that she does not belong to his world. According to traditional masculinity, Tony must have everything: power, money, family, respect. But as the series progresses, we see that none of these bring him true peace. He makes money, but he's never satisfied. He gets respect, but is constantly betrayed. He tries to protect his family, but he cannot really understand them. In the end, he always comes back to the same point. What can fill the emptiness inside him? How should he carry on the legacy he inherited from his father? Herein lies the tragedy of Tony Soprano. He thinks he has everything in life, but in fact he lacks the most basic things. He suppresses his most human feelings because he has to show himself strong, to be loved, to be understood, to trust. Although he wants all these things, he denies these feelings because the world he lives in has always taught him otherwise. But no matter how much he denies it, the truth is inevitable. Tony is a man doomed to be alone with this emptiness he has been fighting his whole life. So what should one do when faced with this kind of existential crisis? According to Jean-Paul Sartre's existentialist philosophy, man is free by nature and must create his own meaning. Tony's greatest tragedy is that he feels obliged to follow the paths drawn by others. Instead of building his own identity, he acts with the sense of power he inherited from his father. As Sartre says, man is condemned to freedom. Tony, too, is forced to live with the consequences of his own choices. If he could be truly free, he could be the architect of his own life and fill the void with his own values. But there is an important point here. Freedom is not just a choice. It also includes the responsibility that comes with it. According to Sartre, man has to bear all the consequences of his own choices. Tony spends his life avoiding these choices. He adheres to the rules of the mafia world, continues the family legacy, but these are all roles imposed on him. Instead of creating his own identity, he continues to play a character he has been taught. At this point, the parallel between Raskolnikov in Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment and Tony Soprano emerges. Raskolnikov commits a murder, believing that he has the right to commit the crime. From his point of view, some people are not subject to ordinary rules. Superior individuals can create their own laws. However, after committing the murder, his conscience begins to gnaw at him, and ultimately his sense of remorse overpowers him. Raskolnikov's tragedy is that he believes that man can be liberated by committing a crime, but in reality the crime leads him to a greater prison, his own conscience. Tony is in a similar situation. He sees power, violence, and crime as a form of freedom. He thinks he determines his own destiny, makes his own laws. But every murder, every betrayal, and every decision squeezes him tighter and tighter. Is he really free? Or is he a prisoner of the mafia, his family, and his own inner contradictions? As Dostoevsky pointed out, man's inner world is his greatest prison. Tony is haunted by his conscience, his past, and the choices he has made. Can one really be liberated by committing a crime? Or does crime lead one into a greater existential prison? If Tony Soprano could reach the freedom Sartre talks about, he could shape his own life and get out of the shadow of the past. But instead, he is stuck as a man struggling with his conscience and his crimes. In the end, Tony's tragedy is the story of an existence that oscillates between man's search for freedom and the chains within himself.